good?
I'll just start saying it.
Mr. City Manager, you good?
Glaze over them.
I'll just sound them out.
Yeah, exactly. Fill in any blank.
Welcome, everyone, to the City Council study session, January 27, 2025. So, Mr. City Manager, we've got 2 items on the agenda. We're going to flip the agenda as it's posted and take the GO bond question first. Do you have anything that you would like to do to frame that discussion?
Mayor, good evening to you and the council. I'll just begin by reminding everybody that on April 8th, Independence voters will have an opportunity to vote on 3 general obligation bond questions that the council has approved for their consideration. And in an effort to help our community understand and become informed of those issues, we are using our study sessions between now and then to talk about each of the aspects of those 3 questions. Tonight, we're going to focus in on the portion of that bond that would assist and benefit the regional animal shelter that is managed by the City of Independence. So Christina Heinen, the Director of Health and Animal Services, is here tonight to give that presentation. And if there's no other questions for me, I'll go ahead and defer to her for the presentation.
No, that'll work. I should have asked for a point of personal privilege first to talk a little bit about just the sadness and the sorrow that we all feel in the city over the fire that occurred this last week. To lose 4 members of our community in that is tragic. I know all of us are saddened by it. It is not the result that any of us want in any of those scenarios like that. And also, so keep everyone that was involved in your thoughts and your prayers. Perspective, and I had someone give me this perspective over the weekend. You know, particularly pray for the firefighters because they want to go into a building and save someone and not to find someone. And so that they're able to work through that and to manage that, just that great sadness, you know, for the families, for all those involved, for all those folks who lost property, who lost all their memories, who lost their photos, all of those things that you lose when there's a fire of your home. But also for the loss of life and those folks that were there to try to save lives and didn't have that moment. And so if we just have a kind of a moment of silence for that before we do the next presentation. Thank you. Thank you all. Mr. City Manager, please proceed. I apologize for the interruption.
Quite all right, Mayor. Quite appropriate. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and now defer to Ms. Heinen.
Thank you.
Hi, Christina Heinen, Director of Health and Animal Services for the City of Independence. I'm here tonight to talk about the Regional Animal Shelter. I will real quick piggyback off of those sentiments to say, you know, at the shelter we have a pet food pantry, we have kennels, we have all sorts of supplies. I know that we've had people reach out who have need because of the fire to have different ways of caring for their animals. We are there. Please reach out. If there's a need, we will find a way to help you fill it. So the Regional Animal Shelter, the current facility is approximately 30,000 square feet. We have space for about 100 dogs and 100 cats. We have a vet clinic with a surgical space. We have 6 enclosed play yards, 2 laundry facilities on site. As was discussed, the GO bond, our portion for the public safety question will be to purchase the animal shelter. Currently, the city owns the land. The county constructed the building for approximately $5.5 million. They still owe approximately $3 million left. So the GO bond, the question would include $3 million for the purchase from the county of the building in order to essentially marry the building with the land and give us ownership over it. The staffing out at the shelter, we have about 5 staff members who work for the animal services side, animal control. We have about 14 staff members that are on the shelter side. We run pretty lean. We are a 365-day-a-year operation. We are there if, during the blizzard, our staff showed up. They made sure everyone got cared for and played with, and the building was taken care of. We are out there every day. We've identified quite a few issues, and I talked to you guys about these issues this last fall. Those issues include the fire suppression system, artificial turf, the plumbing issues, HVAC, fencing, door closers, and roof leaks. Now, I am happy to say that the county, after the last presentation in the fall, they have started addressing some of these issues. The fire suppression system is one where there's still some work that needs to be done. Actually, in beginning of December, we actually had an issue where the fire alarm was triggered and the sprinklers were going off. The county did respond. We were able to get some immediate fixes done, but there's still work that needs to be done that was identified during the annual inspection. The turf is as old as the building. Although we do our best to maintain it and keep it clean, after a while it just does break down and start to pull away. It's detaching from the wood that's around the perimeter, and it's tearing in different places. As you can imagine, some of those dogs get out there and they play pretty rough, and they've started tearing it up some. This is an item that the county does not believe is part of the building, so they are unwilling to replace. Plumbing issues, the county has come out and started some repairs and replacement. There had been multiple leaks throughout the building, and the hot water heater was not functioning. The hot water heater is still not functioning, but my understanding is they have parts ordered and on repair, and the majority of leaks are definitely fixed. We are watching to see if a few of them are possibly need a little bit more work. The HVAC, the county did come out and they spent a lot of time working on the HVAC. This actually seems to be working currently. There was a little bit of a blip last week. They did come out promptly, and they are waiting on a part to come, but it is functioning. The fencing around the play yards is starting to rust. We go through and do our best to coat it and paint it and get it up to speed. It is still continuing to rust and probably needs to be repaired in places, and then there's some areas where for safety it would probably be better if we had a double fence system, a double gate system, in order to make sure that the dogs aren't darting in. And this is another item that the county doesn't consider as part of the building, so they do not consider it as part of their responsibility to maintain. Door closers, the county came out, they replaced a lot. They still had some that needed to be replaced. They actually replaced this last one and fixed it this last week. So it didn't make the loading of this presentation, but it did get fixed. And as of this afternoon when I walked through, it looked like all the door closers had been fixed. Roof repairs, the county did go out. They conducted repairs. They believe as of 2 weeks ago that everything is now fixed and shouldn't be leaking. We have had our staff go through and replace the ceiling tiles, so that we can monitor those leaks and see if they come back. I mean, it is a blessing that we haven't had more snow, and also a little bit of a curse because I want to see if it rains. There's a possibility of rain later this week, so we will know if those leaks are still present or if they were able to fix everything. So the $3 million, although it does seem like a lot of money, in comparison, when Kansas City Pet Project was finished, using that cost per square feet, if we were to use the same amount to build, it would cost approximately $12 million to build the shelter of our size today. We know that building prices have most definitely gone up. All construction prices have gone up. And so it would probably cost substantially more to build the same sort of building today. That is my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
So I'm going to start with, so can you talk about why the turf and the fencing is so important in sort of the daily management of the animals?
So as many of you know, we have approximately 100 dogs on site right now. We now have some free kennel space, but not a lot. The way we make sure that the dogs get out in order to have play groups, to potty, to do any basic functions to get out of their kennel is they are normally rotated out into a yard. So we have those 6 yards. One of them is a puppy yard that's reserved for puppies. The other 5 are for those adult dogs to be able to get out of their kennel. We need good fencing. They need to be safe. They need to be separated from other dogs. Not every dog gets along with every other dog. We need to make sure that they stay safe. We also need to be able to make sure that we can control communicable disease. So we need to be able to clean those areas on a regular basis and make sure that no one's passing parvo to anyone else or anything like that. So it's really important that we have that artificial turf that we can do that to. You can't do that to normal grass, obviously. And to make sure that that fencing is good and secure so that the dogs stay safely in. And as long as we're being honest, we're out there a little bit in the country, and we definitely have coyotes. We saw one just this last week who was hanging around. We want to make sure nothing comes in and our dogs don't go out.
And then can you talk about also why it's important with behavior and shelter stress for the animals?
Yeah. So we want to be able to get those animals out. Although we give the dogs that are there the best life we possibly can while they're there, we try to make sure they have those play groups. We still recognize that they're staying in their kennels for 23 plus hours a day. The kennels are not huge, and they do stay there for a short period of time in their life. You know, it is only about 30 days, but it is still 30 stressful days. And some of those dogs, like Bongo, that we have been there for almost 300 days. That's a long time. They need time to get out there. They need time to be able to run. We have staff who take them on walks. We have staff that, try to take them on outings, but they can't do all 100 dogs like that every single day. But it's important for those dogs to get out, and in order to make sure that they get out of the shelter safely.
And then can you talk about why it's critical that we have hot water every day?
Yes, so hot water is important, as many of you know, for essentially communicable disease control. We use that hot water not only to make sure that the kennels are cleaned well. Many cleaning products only activate well with warm or hot water. We need to be able to wash all the bedding in a manner that we make sure we're getting rid of any bacteria or diseases that might be on that bedding. Our vet staff need to be able to adequately wash their hands in between surgeries. We need to be able to do all of those things to keep not only the animals safe, but our staff safe. We want to make sure that they're not getting anything and that they're being safe.
Okay, last question. What would it mean for shelter leadership and shelter staff if it was our building? I mean, can you talk about why that's important?
So I can speak on behalf of our staff, definitely. It's important for us because when we see these issues, we recognize that the county is not in the building daily. They are not having to live daily in these conditions. Our staff are, and we feel like we don't always have control over how the building is, the environment for it, because we have to wait. Sometimes the processes for ordering parts appear to be more cumbersome on the county side. There have been times where I have offered to just put it on my P card and have them reimburse if we could just get this done quickly. It has taken, the city intervening and starting the work on the HVAC in order to get the HVAC to this point. There have been many times we've had to step in, maybe do things that aren't part of the contract in order to make sure that it is safe and it meets licensing requirements. We don't want to violate a state license. We will do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, and to make sure that these facilities stay safe and secure. I mean, they're for our not only our staff, but our public and the animals that we love and we spend all of this time caring for. We want to make sure that is the best environment we can.
Council member, I may add one thing. Christina did a great job framing that, but from a practical standpoint, I would hazard to guess that most of us in this room at one point in our lives were a tenant in somebody else's building or know somebody who's been in that situation. We are, in fact, a tenant in a building that's owned by the county right now. And much like if you were renting a home or an apartment from somebody, you're probably not inclined to invest your own personal funds in making improvements to a building that you don't own, because that's not a return on investment that you're going to receive. There's probably, in those circumstances, a contract where that landlord is responsible for some of those, most of those maintenance issues at the place you're renting. That is the kind of agreement we have right now with the county. But as Christina has so eloquently said, if our landlord isn't going to be willing to make these investments, we can't continue to let the animals in our care suffer as a result of that. And that's why we recommended, and I believe that's why the council has put forward this particular portion of question 1 to the voters to help address that arrangement that's not working mostly for the animals in our care.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask one more question of
Please, sure.
City Manager? I have had questions this week about Prop P and the ballot language behind that, and specifically the waterfall and how that works with the legislation, the tax that we passed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The original iteration of Proposition P that was passed by the voters had 2 components to that tax. The first component of that was to fund up to 30 new police officers in the Independence Police Department. And the second part of that was to fund $750,000 for the animal shelter. Both of those amounts were then set to increase each year proportional to the Midwest Consumer Price Index, or CPI. So in order to keep up with expenses like we've seen, there was a built-in mechanism in the tax to ensure those weren't stagnant amounts, but they would increase every year to keep up with inflation. The tax went on to say then that after those 2 requirements were met, that our amount to fund the 30 officers commensurate with CPI, and the $750,000 also commensurate with CPI, then voter-approved sales taxes would receive their proportional amount from online sales tax that was collected. So if you were to use the fire sales tax fund, for example, that is a half-cent sales tax. So a half-cent of every amount of the use tax that comes in above and beyond those first 2 buckets does what we call waterfall, flows into that. 1% to the general fund, so on and so forth, to each of the funds proportional to that. So this year, the estimated amount for Proposition P for the police was about $4.6 million and about $893,000 for the animal shelter. We have satisfied that bucket for the animal shelter. At this, we're about halfway through the fiscal year, but we've already captured that amount for the animal shelter, which speaks to the power of online sales. And we're about $500,000 away from satisfying the full amount for the police department. So we estimate that probably beginning next month or February at the latest, then all of those funds will start to waterfall to their tax. But that is what was approved by the voters of how those taxes were set up, and to ensure then equity to all of those other taxes that were voter approved, that they receive their amount proportional to what was originally captured before online sales intensified in the economy.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Please
Mr. Mayor,
proceed.
thank you. A couple of questions. Right now, our arrangement with the Jackson County government is that in order for them to have built this building, we traded them, essentially. We take care of their animal control calls. We house the dogs that are picked up in the county in areas that are not incorporated, and we take care of those animals at our cost in exchange for using the building. Is that a fair?
Correct.
Okay. So should we take possession of the building, that would terminate that agreement, and the county would then have to pay us for the services for our animal control officers and for housing those animals. Is that fair?
If they chose to enter into a contract with us, yes.
Okay. They have options to enter into contracts with other animal control services, but if that were the case, our expenses would go down for operating the shelter for those group of animals.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any requirement, Mr. City Manager, in our purchase agreement for this building that it is purchased repaired? Meaning that if we have to take possession of it, that would mean that, just like any house, it goes through inspection and the AC has to work and the roof can't leak and et cetera. We're not buying as is.
That is our position as this municipality, that as a current landlord, the building needs to meet certain minimum conditions, just as if we were selling a home, that would be subject to inspection and probably wouldn't pass inspection if some of those minimum conditions weren't met. So that is our position, and that is one which we will stand by and advocate forcefully for.
Okay. I want to be sure to just express my gratitude to the county for catching up on some of this deferred repairs. They heard our concerns, they've come out, so, to be sure that we recognize that they're trying to be honorable partners to this city. But then my next question would be, okay, we assume control of the building. How do we then begin to make some budgetary allowances? Eventually that roof has to be replaced. Eventually that AC unit has to be replaced. Are we setting aside dollars that are dedicated to the animal shelter for us to be able to deal with long-term maintenance issues?
I haven't had a chance to visit with Ms. Heinen about her most recent iteration of the capital improvements program, but our 5-year CIP would start to account for that as being one of the assets that need to be maintained and allocating funds proportional to that need to ensure that we do keep up with maintenance and again, make this becoming of the facility it needs to be for the animals in our care.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Anyone else have further questions? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, as of now, we don't have a contract with them, correct?
That is correct.
So, in theory, they can lock that door tomorrow and we would be out of luck.
That is correct. And just to remind everybody, the city has sent numerous requests to renegotiate the contract for the last 2 years through the city attorney's office, through my office. I believe several members of the council have also reached out to your peers on the legislature. We've not succeeded in being able to schedule a meeting these last 2 years to renegotiate a contract.
It's been frustrating, but thank you for the work and persistence moving forward with that. Christina, with the HVAC and the different work that's being taken there, is that the county that's doing that in-house with their skill set, or are they contracting that out?
So we contracted it out first last year, and that work was done through the summer. The county then came and they are using in-house people at this time to fix things as they continue to break.
Is that going well?
They're-
As can be?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well,
They are making an effort, and we understand that not everything can be fixed immediately, so
sure. Well, thank you for the update.
thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please proceed.
Ms. Heinen, thanks for the update. Especially appreciate hearing that the county is making some of those repairs that had been needed. Just wondering, like on the turf and on the fence, that part, those seem to be the big items that maybe we would need to, do some work on if we were able to, get this passed and purchase it. So the question I really have on that is, how much money are we talking about? Any idea?
So on the turf, we're probably talking about 50 to 100,000, probably closer on the 100,000 side. The fencing, I don't know. Less than that, there are portions that we've been able to catch and maintain that I don't think need to be replaced anytime soon. But adding some, there are definitely some gates that need to be replaced. and a few other items that are going to be much lower cost than replacing that turf.
Okay, and so, I don't know if it's a question for you or the city manager, where would we anticipate those funds might come from at this point? Any idea?
You know, I'm not pausing because I don't know. We have options, but I would just want to look at some of the projections for each of those funds to see what's the most responsible over a long-term period to ensure we've got a viable option without placing undue burden on any of those funds. But we have a couple of different sources that would be appropriate to utilize and probably would end up being a combination of those.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anyone else, Rutherford? Please proceed.
Thanks. Just one more. Mr. City Manager, the waterfall. So $750,000 is what we have for the animal shelter. Once that's met, then it begins to waterfall after we hit the PD stuff too. Correct?
It was originally 750. Yeah, this
With the
year's.
escalator.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
So we're pretty close to 900,000 now.
Okay, so we're all in there. Once that waterfall hits, that all goes back to the other departments, like you were saying, in proportional.
Yep. So the general fund gets its proportion of 1%, and then fire sales tax, the police sales tax, the park sales tax, and the stormwater sales tax.
Okay, so from the general funds, and that gets reallocated back down.
Yes, sir.
With needs during the budget
Yep.
process.
All proportional to the percentage amount that was approved by voters. So in the case of the general fund, that's a 1%, 1% general fund, and then we've added that extra quarter cent to support the police department that was approved this past August for wages. So each of the, and then, quarter cent for the police sales tax, the half cent, the street sales tax, all of those get their amounts proportional to whatever was approved by the voters.
So it splits out
Yes.
quite a few different ways.
Correct. Correct. Mhm.
Thanks.
Anyone else other further questions? Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. And Mr. City Manager, thank you. So,
Sure.
and the next item on the agenda is the Critical Materials Crossroads Energy Materials Campus at Lake City. So would you like to frame that in some discussion, or?
I'll just do so briefly while our presenter is getting situated. One of the main priorities in the council's most recent adopted strategic plan was focusing on economic development, bringing more business and commerce to our city. There is a project underway that is looking to satisfy that very goal, not entirely, but a part of that strategy. So tonight we have a guest here who's going to share with you exciting project that may be in our community's future. I will defer to you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Andes. I've presented this presentation to a couple of you previously, so I apologize if you have to sit through it again. Hopefully, I've got some answers for your previous questions, so we'll kind of address them as we go through. I work for UMKC. I've only been there since November, but I was brought in specifically to work on this project. It's called the Critical Materials Crossroads Project. It's about bringing a manufacturing and innovation center out to the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant. Dr. Anthony Caruso, who's on the presentation's title, is my boss. He is the Vice Chancellor at UMKC in charge of research. He is a physicist, and most of our team is in the physics or engineering department. So this is a picture from a consortium that we put together about a year ago, and this is an example of the number of members that we have brought back together, talking about bringing some of this manufacturing to the area. Some of the key notes for this project is we expect it to bring about 10,000 jobs from the Missouri and Kansas border. 2,500 of those will be direct jobs on the campus. The other 7,500 of them will be induced or indirect jobs during the building and supporting phase. We expect about a $17 billion gain in today's money in 2035, based on some third-party analysis that we had done, leading to about a $40 billion impact by 2035. We have forecast that to be about between a 5 and a 6% increase to Missouri GDP and about a 0.6% increase to the Kansas GDP. What we'll be producing on the campus is cathode active material, and we expect to produce about 100 kilotons per year. We spent the last 4 months deeply engaged with partners across both local Kansas and Missouri regions, as well as reaching out to numerous industry partners. Currently, we have about 150 partners that have sent in letters of collaboration, including the City of Independence. Within those groups, we have about 250. It's creeped up to almost 300 different individuals who have committed time and or money to the project moving forward. The breakdown of those partners is below. So the industry meaning a lot of different manufacturers coming to the area. Entrepreneurship, I'll talk to it a little bit later, talking about small business development. Capital being funding partners coming into the project. Civic engagement would be persons like yourself. We have now the number is 27 different research partners from different research institutions, industry, and universities across the area contributing to the program, as well as local, state, and federal governmental support. What we're doing on the campus is creating a US-based supply chain for energy-based materials. So it's listed as the critical materials as the US Federal Department defines it. If you look at what makes up a battery, you start with rock or ore, and that's mined from the ground. That's kind of the step one. Missouri S&T has a big tech hub down southeast Missouri that's focused on that. They recently received a $29 million grant to stand up some of the efforts that they are working on. That's really the focus of their step one. We are focused on step two. It's taking, once that ore is sent down into some concentrates, taking those concentrates and reducing them to higher purity levels, powders for battery grade, and then from that stage taking those powders, combining them to make what's called cathode active material, which is the most expensive part of a battery. There's a cathode and an anode. This is the cathode side. That material is then shipped off to battery manufacturers like Panasonic or Enersys, Eagle Pitcher, all Missouri companies that will be building them into batteries. The reason that's so important is because China owns most of this demand and supply. So all the red here represents China-owned entities and or control of that manufacturing process. You'll also see the light green, it says IDN, and the kind of the teal color DRC. That's the Congo and Indonesia, which are not directly owned by China, but controlled by China interests. And so if you look at this, should we go into have larger issues with China, we have large difficulties getting some of the major issues to build up not only batteries, but superalloys and some medical equipment today. So some of the onshoring challenges that we are fighting against is the top one represents the fluctuation in material costs. A lot of this is due by the fact that China owns all of the market, and so they can increase or decrease the market cost based on their willingness to sell into the market, which makes it very difficult for a US-based, a smaller company to want to not only get into the company or get into the market, but stay applicable in the market. The graph to the right shows the cost of living versus the wages, and you'll notice that a manufacturing cost of living, or excuse me, a manufacturing wage in the United States does not surpass the cost of living where it does in China. So someone in China is much more likely to go into a manufacturing job where it's harder for that to be sustained here in the United States. And the bottom one talks about air pollution requirements. And as you can imagine, the air pollution requirements in the United States are much greater than what is in China, and that directly corresponds to the cost of manufacturing product. The reason we chose this, so UMKC was issued a $1 million grant. So this is the National Science Foundation Engines Program. There's a phase one and what's called a phase two. They were issued $1 million to basically evaluate what was the best research and development that would be worked in the area. And so we spent the last year kind of doing that development and looking about what we have to offer here in this region, as well as what's needed. So we actually started with microelectronics, And then we soon kind of evolved into, with all the incumbent battery manufacturers, and I'll kind of go over that in a second, in the area, and all the natural resources available, that the critical materials will be much more suited for this area. What's important about this material, shipping all that material is extremely expensive. When you ship via barge, and you go from barge to rail, you increase it by an order of magnitude. And then when you go from rail to truck, you increase another order of magnitude. So having access to barge is very important to us. We have partners that we're currently talking about bringing stuff down from Canada. We have partners bringing stuff from Mexico, and also a partner bringing stuff from Australia. So being able to come up the Mississippi River or down the Mississippi River is very valuable to us. And having a rail line on the north side of the Lake City campus is a great way that we're going to take stuff from the barge directly to the campus. Incumbent battery alkaline recovery operations is a long way of saying that we have industry already in Missouri that is recycling batteries and creating the material that we need to feed into some of these intermediates and CAM activities. So we're going to be bringing those to the campus. We have a significant amount of Class 1 rail in this area, as well as significant transportation, warehousing, intermodal facilities here in the area. So this is a very busy map talking about all the different regions and partners that we have. So what I want to point out, I'll kind of come walk over here. So this region over here is where Rolla is out, southeast Missouri. This is where the Tuck Hub. This is it's called Doe Run. It's the second largest lead mine in the world, largest in North America. From that, a significant amount of battery manufacturers stood up over the last 40 years in the Missouri-Kansas corridor. The different colors represent the different levels of partners and different engagements we have. Some of them are civic, some of them are industrial. The light pink is really the region of service. So what really started a lot of this effort is again, the National Science Foundation fund that we are working on. We are working on a proposal that we are submitting on February 11th. It's a 30-page technical document with about 950 supporting documents that go with it. So we're within the last couple of weeks, so I will go from here back to work and can finish working on my section tonight. This proposal defines a region of service, and we have identified 21 different counties in the area which will be included in our region of service. And then affected region is another 12 different counties that will be affected by the efforts going on this project. This is a map of all the battery manufacturers that are located in this area. Number of them you probably heard of, Intersys, Panasonic. I came from the company called Sensata, if I can pronounce it right. Sensata is now owned by Blue Origin. And then we showed down here Doe Run in the southeast corner. But basically, this capitalization of the material and the efforts in the area has really grown the battery industry. It was based on lead acid historically, but all of these are focused on lithium ion, or what are called vanadium reflow batteries, opposed to lead acid. Intersys still does a significant amount of lead acid, but their corporate strategy is to move over to more and more lithium ion. I'm going to skip the slide because it's kind of boring. This is what Lake City looks like if you're not familiar with it. This is the intersection, the traffic circle on the very left-hand side is the intersection of 7 Highway and it's either 23rd or Truman Road there. Lake City is 4,000 acres. We are looking at taking over the light green portion, which is the top 400 acres of that. This is kind of what the build out would look like. We'll be bringing in industry partners. So we will have a development group does all of the development on the campus itself. UMKC will be the kind of the ecosystem. We'll be connecting all of the partners together. So UMKC, while we'll have some presence in some of the buildings, will not be funding this effort. It'll be funded by primarily private entities. We chose this location because on the north side, it's kind of hard to see on this map, but there's a dotted line which represents the rail. Unfortunately, the spurs were taken out about 6 months ago, so we'll be reinstalling those with Union Pacific, but there's a significant amount of rail capacity here. During the presentation I gave to the chamber earlier this week, one of the questions was, would it interfere with the crossing on the left-hand side? The upper left-hand corner there is a crossing right on 7 Highway. We have done the analysis, and there's about a mile run in between the two crossings, this one and the crossing to the east, so we'll have plenty of room to store any cars and not block that crossing during a major activity on that road. So we will have while we will be in the Army base itself, we will have our own gated system, so we will not be included in anything going on but what is run by Olin today. We will be a separate entity. We'll have our own pass system. They recently put in a second gate to handle all of the construction traffic that's going in for the new 6.8 millimeter facility at Lake City. So we'll be taking that over, as well as looking at some development efforts. We've already reached out to Economic Department of, Public Works, and they have some incentive packages that we think we can get between $500,000 and $1 million worth of public works efforts to widen some of the efforts north of this going up to 24 Highway. So that's one of the efforts that we're working on, one of the partners that we've reached out to during this process. Along with a manufacturing campus, we are going to be doing a significant amount of innovation, and that's really where all the research comes in. In order for us to compete with the Chinese, we can't do it the same way they do it. We have to have a leapfrog technology that allows us to manufacture it in cheaper and more efficient ways. And so this is what will be going on the east side of the campus, is really focused on the research and development of the product. So how it works is the research hub shows there a significant amount of research going into it. Like I said, we have about 27 different research projects going into this program. They'll do what's called low technical readiness levels. So basically evaluations determining the capability of some of the product. They'll be doing lab level research over there. Once they get through that and they want to progress into a higher level of manufacturing, they'll go through a gated process, and that's what that A represents. In that A, we'll go through an advisory board evaluation. We'll have advisory boards from each of those listed groups up top, including technical, industry, community, investment, and then the UMKC will have a team as well. Each of them will be looking at the product to see the viability and manufacturability of that. In that gate, we can infuse money into them from capital partners, from the National Science Foundation funding that might be available, or other companies that are on the campus. So we would say, yes, we encourage you to go to a pilot scale, which is basically taking up the manufacturing an order of magnitude. And the campus will have pilot scale and demo scale facilities, which would be a first of its kind in the United States. So this allows a small entrepreneur, a small research company to develop a product and increase the technical readiness, so the product side, as well as the manufacturability before they take it to a full production. So historically, you'd have to build your own facility. In Europe, they have these, in Europe and in China, they have these facilities where what would take our entrepreneurs a year and a half to get facility available. In Europe, you can do that in less than 6 months. So we are enabling product to be innovated faster and at a cheaper cost in order to get to the market to be more competitive. This is kind of a busy slide that breaks down some of the numbers that I spoke of earlier, giving you a little bit of detail on the GDP increases, where the jobs are coming from, what they might look like. We have broke down all the jobs by SOC codes, so we can tell you where we forecast all the jobs to come. It will go anywhere from C-suite positions to forklift drivers. So it'll be a wide range of partnerships here. We've done a lot with partnering as part of the National Science Foundation project. Again, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, it's a $160 million project that would be distributed over 10 years. They are very sensitive to not only creating a manufacturing location, but in creating a sustainable ecosystem. So of that $160 million, only 25% of it can be used for facilities. The rest of it has to be done in research, workforce development, supporting structures, a lot of the build out around that. So I would say probably 40% of our time is focused on the workforce and supporting what we call wraparound services that are going into that. We've spoken to all the local school districts, specifically spent time with Blue Springs, Independence, Fort Osage, Kansas City, Green Valley, all of them talking about this program. All of them have written letters of collaboration and support about apprenticeships, internships, actually curriculum changes, especially at the CTC and the CIC, talking about different academic pathways with Independence. So not only keeping this at the adult level, but bringing it down to the K through 12 level. We expect there will be a fairly steep ramp starting 2026, so we probably won't put a shovel in the ground until 2026. We are working on a long-term lease agreement with the Joint Munitions Command, which is driving through Lake City. So all of our efforts will be with the local command and not with Olin. The reason that Lake City is excited about this is because through that the leasing agreement, all the money goes up to Joint Missions Command, and then 50% of it comes back down to the base where they can do some renovations and looking at bringing more personnel onto the base. So we'll be working on that in 25, build it out, start in 26, and fairly steep increase, primarily through direct jobs after that. These are some of the partners that we've worked with so far. There's probably another half dozen or so that are Independence companies. North Point Development owns the Eastgate Commerce Development to the west of that area, which we've spent a lot of time talking about developing both wraparound services, maybe daycares, restaurants, supporting infrastructure, warehousing out there to support inside the campus, as well as other manufacturers that would not site on the base. We've also talked to Jackson County about some land that they own. It's between 24 Highway and it's, let's see, west of 7 Highway. On Route 24, they own about 400 acres that they're interested in us looking at for a possible manufacturing site as well. We've done work with community service leagues, obviously Independence, Fort Osage, Lake City, Union Pacific. We're petitioning them to put the rail in free of charge so that we can use the money for other activities. It's very common for them to do it based on the amount of load that they would see going through that. And then also a decent amount of effort with KCATA as part of the initiative with the National Science Foundation is bringing jobs to distressed areas. And so we've talked about how we would get the urban core out to this area should they want to pursue work out there. And so currently, as you probably know, the bus line runs to right across the street and stops here. To go out to Lake City, you'd need to take the IRIS program, which is not really suited for one-off. So we were talking about different approaches with KCATA, whether that be a bus system, a dedicated bus, whether that be a van system sponsored by KCATA, whether it be a van system sponsored by the industries themselves, different opportunities as we've kind of looked at what they did for the Panasonic plant out in DeSoto, which is probably twice as far out, but a good model to use for representation. So that's all I have. Feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Please proceed.
So I'm going to show my ignorance here. I am completely unclear on slide 5 on what we're talking about here. So the plant is, we're step 2, step 3. What does this entail? How do you get from
slide?
step 2 to step 3?
Oh, sorry, next one?
Slide 5, yes.
okay.
I think I need you to explain this to me like I'm 10
Yeah.
here.
So step 1 is you're mining rock out of the ground.
Okay,
So most miners, they don't sell that main ore. They refine it down to what's called a concentrate. And those concentrates are typically between a 40 and 95% concentrate. From there, we would take that material as an on-take, is what we call it, to the campus. and that would be refined down further to a battery-grade material. So that battery-grade material goes anywhere from 95.5% to 99.999% purity. That material is then mixed with other like battery materials to make cathode active materials. So depending on the different chemistry, so the battery in your phone is different than the battery in your car, which is different than the battery in a storage unit. And so all of them have different chemistries based on what they're expected to do. And so with each chemistry, they have different concentrates. Some of them have nickel, some of them use an iron phosphate, some of them use manganese. All of them are, so we will focus on what's called LFP, lithium iron phosphate, which is the more popular one. It's the more inexpensive of them. It's like kind of it's not very high energy density, so there's not a lot of power in it, but it's really good for power, a lot of storage. And so the end market that we see is advancing. We're kind of straying away a little bit from the EV market because of the fluctuations, not only in current politics, but some of the markets are kind of showing a slowdown. So we're really focused on some of the defense markets, some of the energy storage applications, the data storage, the new Google Center that's going out would use batteries like this for their UPS and/or solar storage. So we are doing those middle two, and then from there we would ship the cathode active material, which is in a powder form. We would ship it to people like Panasonic or EnerSys, and then they combine it into batteries. That make more sense, hopefully?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, my first thought on this is the first responders and who's responsible for potential accidents or issues when it comes to hazmat and if these materials are toxic, especially if they're being shipped in from mines.
Yeah, so we would be using, the current plan is to use, to work with the first responders that are on the base today.
Okay.
So Lake City has their own first responder group. So Lake City has asked us to separate most of the utilities and the services from what Olin is doing to make it a little bit simpler, but the first responders will be coming from there. Now, as I understand it, Fort Osage has the backup for that. So there will be some training that comes from that, but we are processing powders, and so we are not processing batteries, as you've seen. Like there would not be a battery fire on the base because we are not energizing the material. So we're very similar to a pharmaceutical company, like the BASF facility over by Worlds of Fun. They process materials. That's very much what we're doing. We're processing materials.
Last question, can you talk a little bit about environmental impact?
Yeah, so we'll be on Army base, which is interesting. It has different regulations, but our plan at this point is to meet or exceed all Department of Natural Resources requirements, EPA requirements for the state of Missouri. So we are meeting with them. We're kind of still setting up meetings, but our plan is to meet everything, meet every requirement they have or exceed. We will be putting in our own wastewater plant at the facility. So the wastewater plant used by Lake City is almost at full capacity. So they've asked us to put it in our own facility. We'll be dumping into the same, same water. So the little blue trace is where our output will be, but we expect to be a higher purity than what they are doing. So one of the advancements, in order for us to be able to leapfrog what China does, we have to do it in a cleaner way and less costly, because processing the wastewater is fairly expensive. And so a lot of the innovations that we have coming in are doing it in a more EPA sensitive environment so that they're producing less waste. And so we have to do less filtering on the backside.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Please proceed.
that was a lot of information. And this may not be relevant, but what is a kiloton?
1,000 tons.
5,000, oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a lot. So it will be, a semi-truck holds about 2,000 ton, or 2,000 pounds.
Okay.
So,
And on that same slide,
Yep.
you say that 2 and 3 do not exist here at all?
Not in mass. There's a couple of small manufacturing sites, but nothing at the scale that we're talking about.
So you would be one of the biggest manufacturers or make? of
So the
this?
goal is that by 2035, we would supply 1/10 of the U.S. consumption of those two materials.
Okay. And so step 1 comes in by rail,
Uh-huh.
and then?
Or by barge.
Okay. And then is it all rail, or is there any trucking involved in this at all?
Yes, there will be trucking based on where it goes. Again, trucking is much more expensive than rail. So, for example, if we were to supply to Inertis, I'm not sure if we have a rail that goes directly to them. So there's opportunities for trucking, but there will be a significant amount of rail activity based on
From
this.
that specific location, will there?
From yes, there will be some trucking activities. We have not really quantified the amount, because you bring in different loads of each material, and so some of them will not justify bringing in, especially at the beginning, rail cars.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm lucky that I have heard this presentation twice, which means it's unlucky for you because now I have more questions.
Okay?
The questions that I asked you earlier were all environmental questions. I'll start with the historical question.
Yes.
So you talked about Doe Run being one of the places that your materials are coming from. I am old, which means I remember the gigantic environmental lawsuit in the state of Missouri, which was United States versus Doe Run, which was found against Doe Run for environmental pollution. So I'm going to ask you to speak to that and processes there
Yes, so
versus now.
that was based around a lead smelter that they had at their facility, which has been shut down since then. So they no longer do that processing, and we will not be bringing the lead material to this area. But I don't know the full history on the Doe Run, but I know the main driver of that EPA or that finding was based on this smelter that is no longer available, and that area has been remediated.
So you talked about lithium iron phosphate as your primary. So will you, on your previous slide, you had vanadium, you talked about cobalt, you talked about manganese. Are these going to be the heavy metals coming into our area or just the lithium iron?
It will be based on the manufacturers that come on site. All of them have a little bit different chemistry. Some of them are what are called chemistry agnostic, so they don't care what chemistry. They have a process that they work on that works better. They might use basically a hydrothermal, basically an aqueous solution, versus a pyro, which uses is basically putting in an oven and gets it really hot. That uses it's effective, but it uses a lot of energy, so it's fairly costly. So each of these have a little bit different chemistry. So, for example, Strident Energy up in North Kansas City is a vanadium reflow battery, so they are focused on vanadium. Eagle Pitcher uses they use a high power application, so they use a lot of nickel manganese batteries. Acer is a nickel zinc batteries, and so the manufacturers that will come on campus will be focused on different technologies, and so there could be a combination, but 75% of the research we have coming in is for LFP technologies, but some of the manufacturers, one of the major manufacturers that we're looking at is a phosphate manufacturer coming down from Canada. We have another major manufacturer that, I'm trying to think other ones that have a large amount. So there will be nickel and cobalt. We do not expect them to be the largest. The lithium will be the other heavy metal coming in.
So I'm just thinking about our colleagues over at Centerpoint. So I'm an internist by training. I can tell you that I've never had to deal with a vanadium burn, which is a caustic when concentrated. So obviously our colleagues who would be your first responders to a terrible incident, they're going to need some training and skills that we may not have. Is that something that your organization partners with them on?
Yeah, I would think that would be a great opportunity to partner. Again, UMKC does not have the expertise. We would partner with companies like Strident, who already have that, and like I said, they're up in North Kansas City, and bringing those into, as we kind of build out this partnership with all the local engagements, what that might look like. We have not got to that point where we started talking. Again, we're probably 18 months away before we're finalizing or putting a shovel in the ground, but yeah, over the next 12 months, I would see a lot of engagement with EMS, and both at Lake City and outside the area to see what that might look like.
So you're talking about 100 kilotons a year of concentrate, and you're going to be doing the refining on site, which means you're going to have some residual because you're bringing in and you're going to concentrate it. So whatever the ore is that it's coming in, you're going to have, you explained to me you would not actually have tailings, but you're
Correct.
going to have some residual. And is that shipped off-site, back
No.
on the rail car? Is
Yep.
that stored on-site?
Yeah, nothing will leave the Lake City area at this point.
So what do you do
our
with
job
it?
will be to process, so there's different things, we'll be able to do that. So some of those materials we can store and sell to, so any scrap would not leave. Some of the material, as we pull out those other heavy metals, we'll be able to recover them and sell them on the metals market. So it will not be scrap in that it will go into the ground, it'll be stored in the area, and we actually will. One of the business propositions here is that we're looking at storing material as we watch the markets ebb and flow, and attacking the market when it is high and holding while it's low. So that is one of the major business approaches to using some of the residual materials that is found on that.
And I would imagine the EPA has strong thoughts about how you store those materials?
Very much so, yes.
Okay. And so the oversight, I just want to be clear I understand this, that the environmental oversight will be provided by both the Department of Natural Resources, a Missouri agency, and the EPA.
So because it's a federal site, there are some interesting, it's actually under federal regulation, and I'm not sure Department of, or DNR's responsibility at that site. I don't know if they just take onus once it leaves the building, or once it leaves the property, or if they actually have onus over the, now I think on the air they do, but I'm not sure on anything else. We're actually, like I said, we've been reaching out to them for the last couple of weeks and still waiting for that meeting.
So they should have oversight over your wastewater discharge.
Yes.
Because that's something leaving your site. So
Yes.
DNR would be
Yes.
your regulator there. Okay. And then, as anybody who has watched the news remembers, really awful train derailments and the environmental catastrophe that came from that. Can you speak to what your materials would be like if they spilled in an uncontrolled way?
I cannot, I can get you some answers on that. I would not know the impact of cobalt or phosphates hitting the ground, but we can follow up with that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Are there any environmental impact studies that would be released to the public from your applications?
I don't know if they'll be released to the public. I can find that out for you. There are studies that will be done by the developers. I know that J.E. Dunn, who's doing most of the development out there today, have done like studies on the Lake City side, and I do not have access to them, so I can't imagine that the public would, they would not share them with us, so I'm imagining that they did not release them to the public. For this installation, I'm not sure if that was a Army regulation that they're not released, or that was a J.E. Dunn regulation that they were not released. In this situation, I'm not sure.
Will you be able to get some form of summary for us to review so that we can make reasonable decisions for our 123,000 people who require us to make good decisions?
Yeah, I will put that ask in.
Fantastic. I appreciate your answers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? Are there further questions? Please proceed.
Mr. Mayor. Jamie, I've had a couple of questions, and I'm just going to read it because I don't even understand what it means. I had somebody ask me, does this project fall under the CHIPS and Science Act, which exempts it from Commerce Department's environmental reviews as required by the National Environmental Policy Act?
Yes, it
Do you know?
does, but as I mentioned earlier, that is a exemption that we will not be partaking in. So we will still work with the Department of Natural Resources here in Missouri and meet all Missouri-based regulations.
Okay, okay. So, and one of the questions always for us in Independence is we have a prized aquifer that you know of that provides us all our water, and so I'm assuming there's no risk of any discharge or anything affecting that.
Yes, so we reviewed that today. I was given that question ahead of time, so I did some research and talking with the Vice Chancellor, and the expectation is that we meet or exceed everything that's going into that from Lake City today.
Okay, all right. And then Evergy, you said Evergy provides provides electricity to Lake City, and at this point, you would anticipate obtaining electricity from them, or you don't know, or?
Yeah, so we have not done that analysis or really engaged in those discussions. It came up during the chamber meeting on Wednesday. I reached out to the contact at IPL to start those discussions. We'll have a significant amount of energy draw. Currently, Lake City pulls about, I think the number is a third to a fourth of the energy available to them from Evergy. And I guess that Evergy agreement was well before my time. We are not tied to Evergy, so if it makes financial sense, we would just as well go with IPL. There's no reason for us to stay with Evergy versus IPL. The one thing is that currently Lake City has underway the plan to bring on gas-powered turbines to create their own energy, to be a little bit more self-sustaining. That might be another opportunity for us to pull energy from. Again, that is still in the works, and it's not a fully operational system.
Yet to be determined, huh?
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. So the last question I have really is, what, if anything, are you asking from us here in Independence at this point in time? Anything, or are you just trying to make us aware of what might be coming down the road, or?
Yeah, when we originally started talking to the chamber and you guys, I expected to come here and ask for lots of tax incentives or breaks and stuff, and then I realized that there's not a lot of tax revenue that comes from Lake City to the City of Independence. So that ask is really not on the table. It's really information about what's going on. We expect a lot of engagement over the next number of years with the local municipality and the government side. We expect that the development outside Lake City, we have a lot more engagement with you guys based on what's going on, how it goes on. I think North Point has all that still zoned as ag. So we'll have to talk about what that might look like, a real development plan for that. We've partnered with a couple different development companies that we plan on bringing in. We haven't finalized who we will be working with, but both of these have experience installing manufacturing on Army bases is kind of a unique opportunity and a unique set of skills. And so that's some of the opportunities. And then we'll have a lot of capital partners wanting to engage in what's going on. So I would expect that there'll be a lot of engagement and reaching out to the city about what's going on and how viable this actually is. The National Science Foundation Award is really just a catalyst of what we're talking about. So the award is scheduled for $160 million, again, over 10 years. We have estimated it's going to be about $4.1 billion invested in this for the build-out. We have taken that to a number of different agencies here in the Kansas City area. The Kansas City Area Economic Council, Area Development Council has a I don't know what their official name for, but they do a third-party playbook on where local investment should go into the Kansas City area for the next 10 to 20 years. And this is currently number one on that list of possible investment opportunities for both regional and outside the area investment. We have a lot of matching funds coming in from the Kaufman type for workforce development, other regional Missouri state matching opportunities that might be presented to you as well.
Okay. And you said that you're making a presentation on this February 11th.
We submit the paper
Okay.
February 11th.
And then, so what's the timeline after that, when we might hear something more from you?
I can put you on our mailing list, and you can hear about it all the time. Depends on how much you want to hear. We are submitting on February 11th. They do not promise to award until March of 26. But we have guidance from the chancellor to continue moving forward with this. And so we are spending a lot of time actually getting additional funding to come into it. So not only this funding, but we're working on a number of DoD projects and DIBC projects to fund the CMC team, the team I work for, as we move through this. I would say we plan on putting out a newsletter at least quarterly on progress that's being made. Again, we have about 150 stakeholders that have committed time and or money to the program. So updating them on what's going on. I guess what exactly would you want to hear about? How high of level would you want to?
Well, it'd be nice to hear if you get approved, from the February 11th.
Yeah, definitely.
Submittal. That would be nice to hear that, and then where that might go from there. So.
Yeah. So I would during that time we'll be courting a lot of different companies to come to the area. We've got about 14 of them that have said they're interested, and so in that process, I would expect them to start engaging with coming out to this area. There's opportunity to be on the base. There's definitely some financial incentives for the manufacturing facilities to be on the base. Some of them, there's other limitations that they don't want to be on the base, and so there would be opportunities to come to the city about developments that are outside the base as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else other further discussion?
Yep.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to piggyback just a little bit off of Councilwoman Canela's discussion regarding environmental stuff. So last century, when I was representing the 2nd District, we had a lot of discussion and stuff about soil infiltration and stuff with some of the different hard metals and different things that were out there. So I guess this is more for you, Mr. City Manager. There may be, just for safety purposes and baseline status and statistics of that information from the past that the city has done and has worked with different groups to monitor that soil going around the facility out there. So that may be something in the historical record somewhere.
Appreciate that. We can certainly look into that.
Sure.
I can speak to that a little bit. That is a Superfund site that is being actively remediated. So it was identified by, I don't know what legislation it was, but that is, all but 2 areas are fully remediated. So from my understanding, during some of the world wars, when they would be processing stuff, they took little care about what they did with the arsenic and other materials, and they just dumped it in piles. And so that is leached into the ground. So I don't know the exact number, but I want to say there's over 50 different wells right there that are constantly monitoring, and I think that is readily available. I looked up on Wikipedia the other day. So there is active stuff that's published on that on an annual basis.
I guess my bigger point too is we are monitoring and that has been taking place. So
Yeah.
there's already a safeguard in place there. So in regards to the utilities, Evergy is primary, we can work with that, but water is Independence water. That's not,
So we would actually pull water from Lake City right now. They have an abundance of water, so we would use their
Okay.
water.
Lake City is a customer of Independence Utilities for water.
So we would be able to get pilots off
Correct.
of that
Yes.
water usage. And you were discussing with the discharge of the materials, that will go back into the Little Blue? Is that
Yeah,
what you?
just like Lake City, they have a wastewater treatment plant that dumps into the Little Blue.
Sure.
And so we would do the same. We would actually tap into their exhaust line, most likely.
And that, because the Little Blue goes into the Missouri River, that triggers in the environmental regulations from the federal government. So there's protections there that are already existing.
Yes.
So $160 million, just to recap, over 10 years?
Yeah, so the first 2 years is $7.5 million. And then we get to go through a gated process. They basically say, are you doing your job? Are you doing what you said you do? And then they move on to the next 3 years are $15 million a year. And then they do an assessment. And then the last 5 are $20 million per year. There were 285 applicants that originally applied for this across the nation. They down selected to 71 finalists, and we were one of those. We were one of 4 in the state of Missouri. There was actually 2 that applied in Kansas City, a bio KC one that did not get down selected. The other ones in Missouri are focused on, there's 2 in St. Louis that are focused on medical stuff, and then there's one at Tech Hub, and Rolla is focused on the step 1 focus portion of it. There's only one other project that's focused on critical materials, and that's on the lithium side. So there's some major lithium mines up in Nevada, and so they have a university that's doing a project over there, and we're doing basically all the other critical materials. Based on the amount of money that they have set aside, we expect them to fund 20 to 30 of the 70 for the first 2 years, and then down select as we move on from there.
Well, this is a very interesting project for sure. So thank you for bringing that forward to let us digest it and work through this. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we could do to try to help.
All right, appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else have further questions? Anyone else? Mr. City Manager, anything to wrap up on?
Nothing else on that presentation, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for giving us
Yep.
the heads up and keeping us informed, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Anything else from you, Mr. City Manager?
We have nothing else tonight.
With that being said, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.